Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.
Hello. Would you feel offended if someone were to say you deserved an apology? Well, I'll start this with an imaginary scenario. Imagine a global assembly like the United Nations General Assembly or the recently concluded World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where world leaders are unanimous that there should be an apology for Russian President Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine and waging a 4-year-long catastrophic war. Even as an imaginary scenario, I bet not a few people will frown, scowl, or even wince at the very thought. If you are worried about what the United States under President Donald Trump has done in Venezuela and threatened to do in Greenland, before European leaders coaxed him out of the idea, at least for now, then the above scenario should induce greater reflection. Like we say, what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If Venezuelan oil, Greenland, and the Panama Canal are good for America, if backing Israeli genocide in Gaza while attacking Iran is ideal for Trump, why isn't Ukraine good for Russia or, for that matter, Taiwan for China? But we are not about to support or rationalize bullying and crimes by powerful countries against weaker ones. Welcome to Conversation with Azu, our weekly diary on life and politics. And in this episode, Azu thinks we owe Putin an unreserved apology. And Azu is here on set with me. Hello, Azu.
Hello, Julius. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You have ruffled feathers, and the Russian embassy has reacted by alleging that commentators like you are trapped in Western stereotypes. Do you think they missed the point?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that really the point of that article that the world owes, or that we owe President Vladimir Putin an unreserved apology, was just to put what has happened since 2014, when Russia seized Crimea, side by side with what we have had for just about 1 year of President Donald Trump's second presidency. And to say, well, if the whole world has been up in arms, by a manner of speaking, against the actions of President Putin, and I remember the United Nations was among the first to condemn the action. Of course, other European countries followed. He had his supporters, but they're not nearly as resonant in their objection as the countries that I've mentioned. If we have had that, and the world is still grappling with first the seizure of Crimea, the annexation of Crimea, and then, of course, the war, as you said, declared on Ukraine 4 years ago. Now, that seems, in my view, to pale, compared with what we have had in the last 1 year under President Trump. So it's in that sense that I think that I said, half meaning it and half saying so satirically, to say that, well, perhaps we need to go back and apologize to President Putin. So, yes, but I had expected a more robust, vigorous response, if you may say, from the U.S. than from the Russian embassy. But it's okay. They're entitled to their right of reply.
When I read your headline, my reaction was, you and who won't apologize to Putin. But then I realized that it was a mix of facts, innuendo, and sarcasm.
Yes, it was.
The message just stopped short of asking why Putin, if not Trump. So are you going to reply the Russian embassy?
No, they have the right of reply. I think that they have exercised that right. I will not respond to them. I've already seen some responses online by people who have known and followed my work in the past, some of them in the past about 25 years. And I find the conversation quite interesting, to be honest. That I think that's just all I'll say. I find I think they have made their response, and they're perfectly entitled to their response.
All right, so let's come back to the facts of the article. You mentioned the casualty figures range between 980,000 and 1.4 million, with about 14,000 civilian deaths, making this current Russia-Ukraine conflict the bloodiest war in Europe since World War
Since
II.
since the Second World War, that's correct.
Did the embassy dispute any of these statistics?
No. The facts are not in dispute at all. And you also said, as you also said, I remember that it's also a matter of fact that very reputable, credible diplomatic sources also cited the argument of President Putin, that at the time that there was a meeting that Gorbachev had with some, foreign leaders in the West, that was around 2007, to say that, look, part of the process of perestroika and glasnost, and the restructuring of the Russian Federation and its breakup to 15 countries, that the West will not encircle Russia, which unfortunately is what is
NATO in particular.
That NATO in particular will not encircle Russia, and that those countries bordering Russia will not be members of NATO.
Which is Ukraine.
And which is actually a statement of fact, but I don't think they paid mind to that. And then I remember a friend drawing my attention to say, and that's just dialing back to what you said earlier, that look, you don't know that Wagner elements are around the West African sub-regions you take care about, but that's just by the way. But as you said, there are very strong historical and factual arguments on the side of Russia and Putin for what he's doing, although that does not mean that we should subscribe to a world where might is right, or that I necessarily agree with the points that is made. But if we then even push back or say that what Russia is doing is not a done thing in a civilized, rules-based, then how do you explain what is going on under President Trump? You're threatening, insulting, and it just appears to be no end to the sort of might is right actions that we have seen under President Trump.
All right. So my next question is about Europe, and you see, and I just want to paint a scenario. Trump kidnapped the president of Venezuela along with his wife, and Europe only issued mild condemnations. But when he faced Greenland and Denmark, they became somewhat more alive. There's some kind of double standard.
Oh yes, well, unfortunately, such double standards are the regular, the very regular things that you see in international politics. But don't forget that President Maduro has had quite a running battle even before he was sticking with his wife. Unfortunately, he's had a running battle with a number of Western countries, and there's been campaign both internally and externally. There's been accusation about his high-handedness, human rights abuse. That millions, at least 8 million, some sources say about at least 8 million Venezuelans have had to leave the country on exile, on forced exile. So he's had some problems, no doubt. But whether cutting off the head is medicine for the headache is entirely another problem. So it's entirely another question.
Okay. I've heard that proverb for the first time. Whether cutting off the head will solve a headache. Somehow Trump has cooked up a board of peace requiring member states to contribute $1 billion as seed capital. And Trump is a deal maker, you've always contested here. What is he trying to brew a parallel organization to the United Nations?
Well, he has promised the world, as he often does, that the world has never seen or will never see anything the like of it. But we'll wait to see, because it's obvious that even Israel is America's strongest ally in the Middle East, is not comfortable with that peace committee which he has put together. But we'll wait to see the first country that will put down $1 billion, to underwrite that peace committee. We'll wait to see. I think he has struck off the name of the Canadian Prime Minister Makani for criticizing him in Davos. But we'll see how many other countries will step forward and put down that check. I doubt it very much. Europe does not even have that. How many European countries have that kind of money? I think it's yes. I think it's a joke.
Well,
but
maybe the Arabian states.
Well, maybe we'll have to wait and see. I think it's a joke, but we'll see how it ends. We'll see how it goes. I do not think that... You see, the United Nations, the world set up the United Nations after it was a deliberate, intentional effort after the League of Nations failed and its successor organization, the United Nations, after a lot of negotiation and careful, intentional thinking. The United Nations may not today be what we all desire it to be, but I cannot see a peace committee put up by any single country being a substitute for the United Nations. But we'll have to wait and see.
All right, I want to bring you an excerpt as to why perhaps the Russian embassy does not think Russia deserves an apology. Please take a listen, and I quote. In the last 4 years of the war, the estimated total casualty figures have ranged from 980,000 to 1.4 million, with civilian deaths as high as 14,000, minus the wounded and millions more displaced. The Russia-Ukraine war is the bloodiest in Europe since World War II. Yet there is no end in sight, mainly because Putin insists that he won't stop except Ukraine gives up territory currently occupied by Russian forces, a concession that President Volodymyr Zelensky is unwilling to make. End of quote. And my last question before we call it a wrap, is the United States and the rest of the world in any moral, especially NATO, moral, legal, or humanitarian position to, ask Russia to stop, or China to stop if they were to start this kind of territorial?
Well, that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. Most people will probably agree that much of the world has moved from what people used to call the Hobbesian state, what Thomas Hobbes described as a Hobbesian state. That's why you have nation states and all of that, and also an international global organization like the United Nations, where nations, if they have disputes, can go and there are agencies that can mediate those disputes. But you see, if America, which for many decades has had this moral, has been, has described itself as the city on the shining hill, as the beacon of freedom and liberty. If it's setting this kind of example, then your guess is as good as mine. What that message, the sort of message it's unintentionally sending to other countries. And I'd also like to be clear that what President Trump is doing by no means reflect a consensus in elite America about how international relations should be going. It's certainly not, there's no consensus around it. But it just happens to be the president at this point in time, and then there isn't much, it does seem that much people can do. But there are still voices, even in America, strongly condemning some of these things. And we hope that we'll have more of such voices as the days go on.
All right, for a full text of this article, please visit azuishekwene.com, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our content. Have you taken advantage of Azu's New Year offer, if I may ask? You just have a few days to enjoy generous discounts for 2 new books entitled, I'm reading the title now, How I Wrote a Best-Selling Book in 90 Days While Working Full-Time and Keeping My Originality. That's 1. And secondly, How to Market a Book Successfully, a simple launch guide for first-time authors. Just visit www.azu.media and follow the link. Bye for now. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Julius.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.